Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Melanie Bond. I'm the Director of Community here at Nanit. I am so thrilled to be moderating our first session that is kicking off our Parent Like a Pro Summit, which we are hosting in honor of the one-year birthday of Nanit Community. So as you may be aware, we have a ton of virtual events planned in celebration this week. So we invite you to check out our schedule of events over in the community, which hopefully many of you are familiar with our community, but if not, everyone is invited to join. So check us out there at community.nanit.com. But this afternoon, I'm joined by Sarah Dorsett. She is the CEO of Nanit, and blessing Adesiyan, the founder and CEO of Mother Honestly, which is a platform that is reimagining how women build better careers and happier homes. And so today we're really going to have a discussion around balancing parenthood, finding harmony as a mother, working professional, and really as a person. And as I mentioned a moment ago, I have a 4-month-old daughter, so I'm so excited to learn from the two of you. You have so much experience as mothers, as well as the careers that you've built. So I know we're all excited to learn. Just in terms of this session, so we'll have some time at the end to answer questions. So please feel free to pop those in the Q&A box as we're chatting, and we'll get through as many as possible. And just a quick note, this is such a big conversation and topic I feel like I have with my friends all of the time. And so really the Nanit community is meant to be an extension of this more intimate conversation that we're having today. So definitely join us there for more support and guidance after this session and beyond. So to start, Sarah, blessing, I'd love if you could just give us a brief introduction. So Sarah, would you mind kicking us off?
Thank you so much, Melanie. And I know I've said this many times, but congratulations on your little one. We're so happy to have yet another member, another baby join the Nanit family. So as you mentioned, I'm Sarah Dorsett. I've been the CEO of Nanit now for almost 4 years. And I think everybody is probably needs no introduction, the physical product itself, but I think what I always like to just state is that we're here to make the lives of families better and hopefully reshape the future of families, so that as the world changes, and it's changing so fast, and I think we all feel that, we want Nanit to be the kind of the go-to support for all those changes that are happening both with your family and then in the world today, so that you feel like you have more support and you can move into as the world changes, the modern world, you have a good tool. I am a mother of 3. I'm forgetting what. No, I'm a mom of 3 children. Mason, who's 10, Parker, who's 9. So 2 boys, 18 months apart, and then my daughter Kensington, who's 5. And just like you mentioned, Melanie, I'll just close my intro by saying that I'm thrilled that we are celebrating the 1-year anniversary of Nanit's Community. You and I both were so committed to building this and launching it and growing it, and it's really exciting what's happened in the last year, and that we're here to celebrate with so many great parents. So to the Nanit community's first birthday. This is sort of our kickoff to a 1-week event where we celebrate all of our amazing parents and the ability to connect with each other.
Awesome. Blessing, would you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Adesiyan. I'm the founder and CEO of Mother Honestly. We are a platform that is reimagining the future of women and families at home and in the workplace. And we do that through various resources, community, events, and we're launching a few products in the coming weeks. So just really excited. Our goal is really how do we help women, how do we help families and caregivers in the workplace thrive and flourish? And of course, we also work with various partners, whether that is Nanit or other, care partners that supports women at every stage of parenting, work, and life.
Awesome.
And I have 4 kids. Tyra is 13, Dacom is 4, and Darren is 2.5. She'll be 3 soon. in September. And I have an almost 1 year old. So she's 9 months old. So very much in the thick of everything, like baby, toddler, young kid, teenager. So let's just knock on wood that there is no pregnancy to complete the circle.
You just have perspective going on like every phase that you go through as a parent. Like you can speak to it because you're actually living it right now. And everyone will very much so appreciate that. So both of you, mentioned community, which I think it's something we hear a lot about, especially as you're preparing for parenthood or you're a new mother. So I'd love to get your perspective just on, the importance of building that community or that village as you are preparing to be a parent or in the thick of it. What did that mean to you and how did you kind of navigate that journey yourself?
Who would you like to start?
Either. Blessing, I'll kick it to you. How about that?
So the question is now, how did I navigate parenting as a new parent?
Just kind of building like that village of support around you and
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So for me, I think when I had my kids, when I had my first child, I was completely surrounded by a lot of people, whether those are my friends or, neighbors. It was just there. I didn't really think anything of it because I was close to family. I was close to so many people. But then when I had my second child, we were away from family, we were away from relatives, and it was just me. And I remember just, feeling very alone and very afraid, to be honest with you. So I started seeking out community. And I think that's something that, especially now that, a lot of that community can also be in person or remote. I pretty much started having one-on-one conversation with other women saying, how are you managing things? How are you, what are you doing? How are you going to return to work, with confidence and resilience? How do you feed the baby? How long are they supposed to sleep? Right. So just having real and honest conversations with these women. I remember joining a program just about 15 minutes away, and it was all about, returning to work after baby. And it was about 8 of us, and we would form a circle every single Tuesday at 10 a.m. And it was literally one of the best experiences of my life. And then when I had my daughter, that was, of course, in COVID times, and just having conversations like this over Zoom or, meeting up with other women that we're in the same bubble and we can just have that real conversation. That has been really, really helpful. And a lot of times as women, right, we thrive on community. So I tell women, don't make that mistake of thinking, I don't need anyone, or, I can do this alone. I can figure it out. I can Google my way through it, because that's not true, right? We've seen time and time again that women need community. Women need support, and women need to be reassured and encouraged, right? It's kind of like, okay, should I do breast milk or formula, right? If you find somebody that says, great, you can do both, right? Why don't you, try this and try that? You feel encouraged versus going on the internet and maybe finding, a very bad advice that may not be personalized to you, right? So that's how I approach community, and I've been able to use community in my own journey for all 4 kids. I have never felt alone. Obviously, I started Mother Honestly as a result, but I've just never felt alone in that journey. And I think everyone can find community. And I love that Nanit has a community that supports women, that really, is a place that people can come to for information, for resources and advice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you touched on like how getting that support from other women who are in a similar phase to you is so incredibly important, because even if you have friends who have children, especially when your babies are very young, they're changing so quickly and you so quickly forget what it's like, even just a couple of weeks ago. So being able to find people that are just in the same phase as you is like just so reassuring, as you mentioned. I love to hear that.
Absolutely.
Sarah,
Absolutely.
would love to get your opinion on the importance of community and just kind of building that village of support around you.
Well, I echo a lot of what Blessing said. I mean, I think I've often said that that for me, community really sort of started at home. Like, how do I think about just that unit at home? Like, how do you make sure that you have that feeling of community, just even with your spouse and whoever you're surrounding yourself with when you first bring that new baby home or bring multiple babies home. But after that, I think I cannot tell you how important it's been, even for myself, to have a sounding board, to be able to make connections with people who have gone through what I've gone through, but who also are going through the same thing I'm going through. So we're problem solving together. And I think there's definitely, from a female perspective, there's a lot of strength in problem solving together. I think what's beautiful about moms and women connecting is how deep we can get into conversations, and we can come at it from the mental and the emotional and social. We can kind of cover all these different aspects where I don't think I always can get everything covered with my husband on that front. So as much as I love having that, kind of community and support at home, I feel like maybe there's some missing pieces because he's not seeing the world through the same lens. And so, as a mom, it's been critical, especially as a working mom too, because sometimes I have felt a bit out of touch. Like, I don't know what's going on. There are definitely people, in my own, more nuclear community, or the more localized community, who they have all the information and they can help you navigate what to do and when to do it, and even kind of keep you updated sometimes. And once you get in the habit of that, it becomes you have the kind of this trusted network of people who aren't really going to steer you wrong. And I think that's just critical for your own sanity as a parent, but also I think really healthy for your life as a mom.
Absolutely.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I think Melanie is
Melanie froze.
we'll give her time. I can continue. This is what I do for a living. So yeah, I mean, so one of the things that I always, especially, and I don't know how many people in the chat, are working parents, or have other responsibilities, right, outside of their babies, because that is where I see, when it comes to fostering that community, because you have all of this additional responsibilities. And I don't know, Sarah, if you've experienced this. Of course you have, right? As a CEO, where you have, you're responsible for a company, and you're responsible for employees and the business objectives and the profit objectives. And it could be, a mom that has a job, or they're taking care of an aging parent. So how have you navigated that?
Well, I think, oh my gosh, I don't even know if I could call it navigating. I think some days it's just day by day. Other days it's, okay, how much can I cram into the mornings that my children feel like I actually gave them full attention, but really in my mind I have, 50 things, a running list of 50 things. I've had to learn to forgive myself a little bit, and also maybe do a little bit less than I used to. I know that might sound a little crazy, but I don't think I was doing anybody any favors by trying to boil the ocean. And so I really started to manage. It probably took a whole year to help, especially I really worked on it this past year, so it's pretty new to me, to really sort of try to manage my schedule, understand how to schedule the kids. I have a much better handle on what's going to work for them and what's not. And then really just being super, what's really nice after, when you're with a company for a while, is everybody gets to know each other, and they get to know each other's families, and who's doing what, who plays sports and who has music, and who, and how the schedules sort of work. And so sort of a lot of the members, I think, on my team are very familiar with my own children's schedules. So kind of working for a company where you can kind of bring that to the company, I know that's not what everybody else necessarily has, is a big benefit of Nanit. But just kind of making sure, I think, setting some boundaries with your work, as you develop relationships with the people you work with, on what's important to you for both your family and your career. And I think it really, if you show up in both places, I think I think you definitely get the credit, both professionally and personally. So yeah, I would say that it's more of a it's more of a juggling act than really balancing.
Absolutely. It's the same thing for me. I think just being very clear, there's, priorities change from day to day, week to week, and really just, but being intentional still, right? That I will make the time. A good example was over the weekend. It's been a very crazy week, as you can imagine, with Roe versus Wade, and, the way our community is responding to that, and just really exhausted. But I already had a brunch planned with another mom, who is, a working mother, and wanting to, just sit and have a conversation outside of a baby. And I said, you know what? I'm going to honor this commitment, right? Because, I made this, this was an intentional meeting that I had set aside to do this with this person. And I mean, we had the most amazing conversation. And I really walked out of that meeting feeling very grateful, and quite frankly excited that I did show up. So being intentional about that community is also so important, right? Because if you're not, you wake up and 3 weeks later you're like, oh my God, it's been just me and I've not seen anyone. I haven't chatted with anyone. I've just been changing diapers and, ordering pizza, versus versus, really connecting with, another mom or another dad, or, somebody else that can really support me in this journey as a parent.
Yeah, and I would also say, just from what's really interesting, because obviously I've sort of worked through all of my children, so I've always had this career, always had not always the same job, but I have so many friends in my community who their job is mom, and I think what's been kind of amazing, as I've developed these friendships, is because their job is mom, they know a lot about, mom life. They know a lot about understanding their kids and their needs, and they have all of these resources that I don't necessarily have, but may need at some point. And I've started to realize that our conversations are actually talking about balance, are actually very balanced, because while they center for them around all of these amazing resources and things that they're learning about their child, I can bring a perspective that kind of can pull them out of that a little bit, because I have to balance so much. But then, I get the benefit of all of this amazing knowledge that they already have, because that's where they devote, their time. So it's really been healthy for me to have friendships with moms who, that is their main job, and also moms who, have look more like, me, who have a career.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Welcome back, Melanie.
So sorry about that. I mean,
no problem. No
life
problem.
working from home when your internet just decides to stop working at the most important moment of the day. But thank you for carrying on without me. But I know it sounds like you were talking a little bit about balancing it all and the mom guilt piece of it, which I know so many of us experience. But something that I'm personally going through, so selfishly would love to ask this questions, and I know some of our audience is probably in the middle of this as well, returning to work. So would love to hear about what that looked like for you, and just kind of how you navigated through that transition, because I feel like having the baby is a huge transition, and your life shifts more than you would ever realize that it can. And then that next big shift is if you choose to go back to work in an office, what that looks like, and kind of how to work through that, because it is a big one, I think.
Absolutely. So first of all, we have a toolkit around returning to work. That's one of the things we do at Mother Honestly. We create resources for women, for families, any caregiver that needs that support. But I'm gonna, just share my own experience when it comes to returning to work. My first 3 kids, I was in corporate America, and I needed to get back to work. And so, I was fortunate to have some parental leave, right? My partner also had some parental leaves. So I think really just trying to now understand, what do I have, right? What is available to me? Is it that I have 10 weeks of parental leave? Does my partner have 10 weeks of parental leave? What does that look like? How do we plan that out, right? Do I take mine? Obviously, you probably want to take yours first if you're the birthing parent, right? So we take yours first and maybe stagger it. Or if you really want that, amazing experience where, both of you are in there together, then you can, of course, take it together and then get whether it's a nanny or a childcare center lined up. I think the biggest reasons why women don't want to go back to work is when they cannot find adequate support system, right? Think about it. First of all, the cost of childcare, right? 41% increase since the pandemic. Same thing with actually finding childcare. 51% of us live in the childcare desert. So again, these are all the things stacked against us as parents. So figuring out your parental leave, figuring out, where do I fall in all of this, right? Can I really afford childcare? What does that look like? And start aligning your childcare resources. I think that's another one. And I think, then start asking yourself questions. How do I really prepare to return to work with confidence and resilience, right? Because the last thing we want is for you to return to work exhausted, tired, which I have been in literally almost all of these cases, right? Where, I get back to work and I'm like, what is going on, right? And a lot of time, most companies just like, whoa, you're back. There you go, right? Like, we missed you, take your stuff back and start flying, basically. So really having that conversation with your management and saying, can I ramp up slowly, right? Is that a possibility? Or can I work remotely for, 2 or 3 days out of the week so that I can really adjust to, returning to work permanently or to the office permanently, if that's an option on the table. I think if you work for yourself, right, definitely putting some, measures in place. There's a book that was written by my wonderful friend. It's called The Expecting Entrepreneur. And, it really talks about how to manage that phase of going to have a baby and then coming back to work as an entrepreneur. So I think really just being very clear on exactly what you need. I love lists, like I love checklists. So if I were you, I would literally just sit down and say parental leave, childcare, household responsibilities, things that could potentially derail you, right? Those dishes are not going to wash themselves while you're at work, right? And now you have a baby to think of. So really thinking about that and then sitting down with your partner, right? To say, all right, how are we going to do this? Right? Who is going to be responsible for what, when, and how? So that, we're not passing each other. That doesn't create another, resentment, because you don't need that, right? You're probably already resenting yourself for going back to work or your manager or your company, right? So you don't need additional, I'm being honest. This was how I felt. I got really, really upset about going back to work. So I made a list and, just started walking through that list. So we've talked about different things now. We've said parental leave. We've talked about, childcare. We've talked about, partner outsourcing, right? If that's something that is available to you, really figuring out, what is my self-care routine going to look like? Because that's something that you should always have on your list, right? You should always put yourself on the list as well and say, how am I going to take care of myself? Because I can't be all of these things without taking care of myself. And then maybe even having some career goals, right? Is this year the year that I want to pursue, some promotion? Is this the year I want to advance my career? Is this the year I want to get an MBA? Is this, just really asking yourself some very tough questions. And then, goals for your baby, right? Do you want your baby to, spend some time outdoors, spend time with family? Really looking through and really thinking through all of these things will help you to design that return to work plan properly. And the old saying that says, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? And I know you have a lot going on, right? Especially when you have a young child. But I always just start with a Post-it note. That's my go-to for anything that I'm worried. I don't know what I'm doing. I just know that I need to put this down. I would just start with a Post-it note and say, okay, checklists, right? And then maybe while you're having, a glass of wine and your partner is next to you, like, oh, okay, Post-it notes, number 3, right? Like, partner, let's talk about this. So really just putting together a plan. And you don't need to write it down. You just need to make sure that you've actually discussed those things with the affected party, right?
Yeah. And you mentioned, I think, about creating boundaries. And I think that's so important. And it's something that I think I've struggled with in the past, trying to do it all. And, you really can't. And so I think when you're going back to work, I love that idea of creating a list, organizing everything. You don't have to tackle it all at once, but at least you know exactly what you do need to tackle in order to make that transition a little bit easier, because it's going to be hard no matter what, but you can make it easier on yourself. So that's really helpful to hear. But Sarah, I'd love your perspective on this one.
Oh my gosh, I think Blessing gave a lot of great advice. And I actually have a running checklist in front of me right now for what I have to do today. So I do what you do all day long. I'm like, I cannot forget. It's amazing what happens when you have a baby and your brain just stops remembering things. It's incredible, frankly. It's almost like I know now I'm going to forget. But I think that the only other thing that maybe I could add is something that I think, Blessing, you were kind of, you talked through quite a bit, was just kind of doing that, not only assessing and evaluating kind of what are the choices that I need to make and how do I think about things that I want or might want to even think about. But the only thing I would add to that is also just thinking about just doing a little self check-in almost every day. Once you go back to work, when you come home, it'll feel really different. It feels very different, especially those first couple weeks when you're done for the day, you walk back. I did this 3 times. You walk in the door and now you're a mom and your kids haven't seen you all day. And especially if it's right after the 3 months that you've just had with them or however long, and they're used to seeing you and they're very attached to you. Now all of a sudden you're gone for 8 or 9 hours. That transition moment between when you leave the house and, when you leave for work and you leave your children and wherever you may, whoever may be taking care of them, if you take them somewhere, if you have in-home care, or when you come home, those moments I've learned over time, those moments were so critical. And it became, just from my own personal experience, it became such a critical sort of time for me to think about, how did I want to start my day? Where did I want my children to end up before I went to work? So how did I want them to be feeling? What did I want to understand about them? Did I feel good about the way that I left them at school or, at home? And then when I came home, I think the harder part for me was transitioning out of work mode. And sometimes I didn't have enough, I think, time in between when work ended and mom life began. And I found myself kind of tripping over myself a little bit when I got home and, and wanting to see my kids, but being so unprepared for what we were going to do next when I walked in the door. Was it dinner time? Was it not? Was everybody running around? Did somebody want to talk to me? Did somebody want to play? Was somebody having a meltdown? Did somebody have a bad day? And so managing kind of those moments, if you're a parent who, is separating yourself so that you can do work and then coming back into the moment, it's a little, I definitely found it challenging to be working while I was trying to be mom at the exact same time. So trying to understand that balance of when those moments are, when you can turn one off and really dedicate that quality time. Remember, it's not quantity, it's all about quality. So you can give them your undivided attention, and when do they need it most? And if it is the moment sort of when mine are, then how do you kind of manage to shut off work for a little bit so you can really turn mom on for when they need it?
Yeah, that's incredibly helpful advice. And I think is a nice segue into kind of discussing parenting a little bit more and your philosophies around parenting. And I think something that I've read a lot about, and I feel like I have all of these books and haven't started half of them, but we all obviously want to raise children that we're incredibly proud of. So how do you approach this? Because I think it starts from the very beginning. So would love your perspective on, how you raise those types of children.
No, mine is I used to be that parent, and you can probably hear my kids screaming in the background. I used to be that parent that, wanted my kid to be the smartest in the room. We did everything. We did the command, we did math, flashcards. I mean, we did everything, organic food. And then, I find that now with my other 3 kids, I'm a little bit more relaxed. And it's not because I don't want all of those things. I think it's because I've realized that, uh, I can't possibly be everything, right, to my children. I can't, in the past, I would fill up my calendar with everything, right? We had Mandarin, French, we had Spanish, there was, swimming and piano and gymnastics. And, I was always constantly driving around, right? Drop off, pick up. And obviously that has reduced since COVID, right? What I find is just pick a few things that matters to you, right? Beyond the school, right? Daycare and things like that, which, it's very good for kids to get, whether it's a preschool education. We've seen the study shows that early education is really good for them. So really having, a plan for that if you're, if that's something that really excites you. But also just picking a few things that are important to you. Sarah mentioned quality time. I know that, especially as a founder and as a mother of four, it's just a lot of things that I'm having to do, right? As a result, I can't be there as much as I would love to. And so first, thank God I'm working from home. So, I can always, okay, 15 minutes break here. I'm rushing downstairs to the baby and we breastfeed, and 20 minutes break here, I take the kid out for a walk. But during the week, I pick one thing that I love to do with my kids, which is cooking. I love cooking, but I don't have time to cook. So what do? Saturday morning, it's pancakes, right? It's pancake Saturday, and everybody looks forward to it. Those that are grabbing orange juice and bacon, and the people grabbing, the pancake mix, and everyone, the entire kitchen is turned into literally a science experiment, right? And it's fun and everybody loves it. And then we, afterwards we do swimming, right? So I call them my swim team. I have four. So, like these are my swim team. So we go out for swimming on Saturday, and by the time we come back, everybody's tired, and we just order pizza. And so my Saturdays are non-negotiable. I actually still work on a Sunday, maybe half a day or a few hours. But my Saturday is non-negotiable. And that's that's the day that I use for that one thing that I love to do with my kids. So, during the week, I still spend time with them, but, everyone is always like, yeah, like we have swimming on Saturday and we have, X, Y, and Z on Saturday. So I think really picking that one thing. So that way, when you feel guilty on a Tuesday, right, because you didn't get that 30 minutes in, or, you only got 15 in, or you only got 3 hours in with, with this child, you can then say, okay, well, I know that I have Saturday, right? I know that I have that one day that is all for them. So my kids, they're actually sports now because they know I would never plan anything else on a Saturday. So even when you call me randomly, you're like, oh, bless it, let's meet up on Saturday, I'll be like, like that's not me. So really figuring that out. And I think for me, the other thing is don't overschedule these kids. I think data already shows that, children are actually better off being bored than being slammed with multiple activities. Find one or two things that they really care about. So, for my kids, it's swimming, they love to swim. So we picked that. And, I married that with me being with.
Is it me or?
I think it might be blessing this
Okay,
time.
I assumed it was me. I was like, not again, gosh.
No, we have some technical.
I was like sitting so
today.
captivated by everything that she's saying. So
I know, I was so enthralled too. I'm like, those Saturdays sound like the best day ever. I really
know.
feel like if I can make that Saturday happen. Oh, is she coming back? Blessing, you froze, but I mean, we were completely, when you froze, we were like, we're not sure who was frozen, but those Saturdays sound like heaven. So
Absolutely.
what a fun time.
But that just gives you, I think, a lot of time there's guilt, right, as a parent. And I think, being able to, stop that guilt before it even takes off, to say, no, I got Saturday, that's 24 hours, extra on top of, what I've committed to this week. It's really tough as a working parent. It's really tough if you don't have that time to spend with them, and even carving out time for vacation and really blocking those. Super, super important, right? I've seen, employees say, oh, I'll pick the call while I'm on vacation. And I'm like, hell no, right? Like block that time. If you're on vacation, I don't need you checking in. So really, really being intentional about, about those days as well.
Thanks so much, Melanie. Do you want me to jump in on this one? I'm like so impressed. I don't know where to.
If you have something you want to share, absolutely. We do have a couple of questions though, so I want to make sure we're able to get to those before we wrap. So maybe, yeah. So this is actually a phenomenal question. I feel like I've read a lot about this type of like how to navigate the situation. So someone asked, they're very concerned about telling their employer and their boss that they're expecting, because when they're due, it's going to be a very busy time of the work. They work in accounting and they're due in mid-November. So they haven't told anyone that they're expecting because they're just really concerned about the reaction from work. What if they're treated differently? What happens to their career path? So any recommendations on how to tell your boss and how to prevent discrimination due to your pregnancy?
Well, the thing I would say to that one is number one, you don't need the stress of worrying about what your work is going to think. Especially if you are pregnant. My advice, even though I know, it's almost like rip off the Band-Aid, the sooner you tell everyone and the sooner you'll know who you're working for and what type of a company you're working for, and you can it's okay to make some decisions on whether or not you want to remain working for that company if they are going to react in a way that causes more stress for you or makes this experience negative for you in any way. I definitely advocate for taking a look at that, because that is not okay. When you are pregnant, the best thing you can actually do for your employer is to tell them as soon as possible, as soon as you feel like you want to share the news with your friends and family, you should share it, because it takes that stress away. You've got it out in the open. It gives you, the more time you can help your employer acclimate to the idea that you won't be there, that you're planning to take some time, that, let's figure out the plan here. You will start operating in a setting where you've been transparent about everything. You will start to operate in a mode of, okay, I'm going to be leaving in 6 months or 8 months or whatever it is. And so we have to start thinking about this now. And the more that becomes part of the conversation, I know, Melanie, you just had this experience with us. And I don't know how many meetings we were on, almost on a weekly basis, where we're like, okay, she's about to go out. Okay, everybody, it's a month left. What are we going to do? And we started, I think, our dialogue in the company was around, Melanie will be out, so let's think about what we do next and how we're going to prepare for that. But, you gave us a lot of time to do that. And I highly encourage, one, to just get that stress off of you. You won't know what's going to happen until you do it. So, don't internalize what might think might happen when you share the news. And you're entitled to not only, that information, because you're going to, I think on Zoom, what's really interesting is I've had stories shared with me where people didn't know because you couldn't see that they were pregnant. And so the company would find out just a couple months before they went out. And then the feedback that I would get from these other companies was, I didn't have time to prepare. I fully support this experience, but I didn't have time to prepare. So I think for your own mental health, you need to share the news, and again, start setting those boundaries, start talking about those plans. I think the more time you give your company, the more time you both have to adjust to what the future will look like, because the future will change not only when you have that baby, but every minute afterwards too. So you can just start preparing the minute you start to share.
Yeah. It's funny. I remember so well when I told you I was pregnant, Sarah. And I think the first thing I said was, oh, I know the timing isn't great, because I had just been at Nanit for, I think, like 6 months when I found out I was pregnant, and I shared the news, and Sarah was like, oh my gosh, who cares about timing? Like, we're just so excited for you. So, and I see some people mentioning in the comments that, I think it's a lot of time our own anxiety, our own internalized feelings. And so, like Sarah said, just being able to share that, I think, will help a lot. And if your employer doesn't react the way that they should be, that's like a different, I think, conversation and thought process to go through. But
yeah, it's a different way to prepare. If they're not going to respond with any support, then you're going to need the support long term. Either something has to change in that organization if you love working there, and having that conversation right away about how you're feeling about the response will just help you understand what needs to happen in the future, because you're going to want to devote your time to your top priority, which is your child. And if your company just can't get there with you, then it is absolutely okay to start thinking about a different choice.
Yeah. Blessing, is there anything you wanted to add to that question?
I mean, I think Sarah pretty much answered that beautifully, which is rip the band-aid off. The more time you take, the more, the more backlash you could get, right? Like, oh my God, you didn't tell us on time, and now we don't have anyone to backfill you. So I think definitely rip the band-aid off as soon as possible. Be very clear, right? That, this is important to you, because I think, everyone is human, right? The manager probably is like, oh my word, I don't want to lose a good employee right now, because I have all of these objectives. But I think just being very clear that this is very important to you, and and that it's going to happen in November, and you understand that this is a busy season. You're happy to work with a temporary replacement, or whoever is going to be absorbing this job while you're gone, to make sure they have everything they need. And just leave it at that. I think if you spend a lot of time overthinking this, or if you spend a lot of time trying to figure out what you're gonna say, then it's just not gonna serve you in the end. And you also want to get this out of the way as quickly as possible. You're having a baby. You don't need to be stressed to the point where you may not want to for example, right, I know this has happened to me before in the beginning, where I didn't want to disclose, and now when anybody says, oh, this is due in December, right, because I know the baby is coming in November, my heart is like this, like, ooh, I'm not going to be there. When do I talk? You don't need that kind of stress. So just be very clear, and see what happens. And second of all, you have a lot of time. If this doesn't go as planned, right? If there's a huge backlash, then it's an employee market, right? There's a lot of great organizations that you can start. You now have time between now and November. That then if they actually hire you as a pregnant mom or a pregnant woman, then it tells you and it signals to you that this is a great company that I want to work with.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really helpful, I think. I think we have time for one more question. So someone asked, they're a first-time mom returning to work. They have a 4-month-old baby. How to manage expectations about what is provided to their baby at daycare. So they're kind of worried about the lack of responsiveness and connection at daycare when they're so little. So they feel guilty all the time.
Oh yeah. So for this one, first of all, go grab our toolkit on how to find the right childcare. We have a lot of steps on, how, what are the things you need to ask? What are the, how do you know that, this is a quality childcare? That's going to be very important for you. But I think when it comes to childcare, the reality is that there just aren't a lot of quality ones right now, because the ones that are of high quality are filled up. And so you just need to be very, very clear on what your non-negotiables are. So if you already have a very weird feeling, half of the time as a parent, when you already have a weird feeling, it's probably true, right? No amount of toolkits, checklists is going to help you. Unless they come back and say, oh, here's actually how we feed, Joseph, and this is when he sleeps, and this is when he wakes up. And if that answer eases your fears, then great, go for it. But I would just put down my list of non-negotiables. And so when you shop around and those non-negotiables are, not being met, then you haven't found the right match. So that's sort of how I will, do this. And in addition to that, look at other options, right? There could be, nanny sharing. There could be, maybe a family member that, has, a few hours on their hands during the time that you actually need childcare. So I think really just looking at other various options beyond the daycare center. When I was looking for daycare for my kids, I found out that, there was a young lady that was, willing to get paid $15 an hour. And, so we did 8 hours a day and it was perfect, right? My husband would leave early and come home early, and I would leave later and come home later. And it just worked out really well. And, our daughter was home and well taken care of, at the same time. So look at other options and see if that works as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you about always trusting the mom instinct because it is so real. Like just always trust what you feel in your heart. I think it's so important. We're a minute over, but I want to just quickly thank everyone for attending today. This was an amazing conversation. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Blessing, for your time. We really appreciate it. For everyone that was here, if you joined late, we will be sharing out the recording, so you will have access to that. And then, as we mentioned at the beginning of the call, we have a ton of other events happening. We have an Sleep A to Z webinar tonight at 7 p.m. And we have Dr. Krupa in the community answering your questions about your baby's growth and development. So be sure to tune into those. But thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.